After each of my cruises, I like to make a video of all the good and bad, in my opinion, of the ship and cruise line. I don't do this because I'm super picky, although some viewers have accused me of that. I'm really not, I swear. Nor do I do it just to complain, although I do love a good gripe session. I do it so viewers can know what to expect and be able to make an informed decision on whether or not that ship and cruise line is for them. Ahoy travelers! It's Amy here to help you make your travel experience a success by giving you an insight into my experience on the MSC Euribia. Well, all cruises have their positives and negatives. I can't imagine that there would ever be a perfect cruise or ship since everyone has their own idea of what that would be. However, I always say that cruising is like pizza. There's no such thing as bad pizza, just better pizza. The same goes for cruising. Any cruise is a good cruise because you're on vacation. However, there are going to be some cruise ships and lines that you will enjoy more than others. And what one person loves out of cruising may be something others don't enjoy. So first of all, we were in a regular balcony room. Second, we don't have a high loyalty status. And third, we most assuredly were not in the yacht club. So this review is based on the experience of regular cruisers. So let's get the negative out of the way so we can save the good stuff for last. Number one, probably the thing we dislike the most about the Euribia, and I believe it is like this on all MSC ships, was the lack of included restaurants. Now, of course, Mom and I are used to sailing on Carnival for the most part, which is probably the best when it comes to included restaurants. But MSC did not have any included restaurants other than the normal main dining room and buffet. The only other place that you could find included food was a small outdoor serving area near the pool, but it was usually just burgers and hot dogs whenever I went by, one time pizza, and they weren't open that often. It seemed to be an outdoor version of the grill section of the buffet. So it wasn't new food, it was buffet food in a different place. While the MDR was open for breakfast and lunch, guests only had the option of sitting at large family-style tables with other cruisers. Normally that wouldn't bother me, I've done it before, but it was a little awkward with all the various languages. The one time Mom and I went to the MDR for breakfast, it was definitely awkward as we were sat with others who not only knew each other, but were all speaking German, and they didn't talk to us. We quickly ate our food and left. Now, we knew going in that there would not be many native English speakers on board, and we were fine with that. But sitting family style with people we couldn't understand was not something we really wanted to do again, especially since neither of us are even big breakfast eaters. After that, we chose not to go to the MDR for lunch either, which meant lunch in the buffet. Now, usually we avoid the buffet during our cruises. I might go in there once or twice to go grab a bagel for breakfast, but as it was really our only option, we ate in the buffet more on this cruise than ever before. Maybe more than ever combined. I don't know. We did find that going when it opened at noon meant fewer crowds, as it seemed the majority of cruisers showed up later around 2 p.m. I have a future video planned on what we ate and if we enjoyed the food on MSC, where I'll go into greater detail on the buffet because there was something we really enjoyed about the buffet. So 2, I love a good adults-only area on a cruise ship. Having a space to get away from kids running around is nice, but they also usually tend to be quiet spaces, a place to go and relax with a book. Unfortunately, there were no adult-only areas on the Euribia, and there were a lot of young children on the ship, more than I'm used to. Maybe it's a European thing, but I've never sailed with so many children under the age of 10. I don't know if just Americans don't tend to cruise as much until their children are older, but this was definitely a different experience. There were times when we'd be relaxing with a book and a drink and a lounge, and a family would come in with young children. Now, while that is not overall a bad thing, it is if the parents let the children run around all wild, which happened more than once. Now, having an adult-only area to escape to would have been a nice option. Of course, since every adult-only area I've ever experienced was on an open deck, I'm not sure how much use we would have gotten out of it on a Norwegian cruise in the fall. Even though it was warm for this time of the year, it was still a little cool to hang out on an open deck, especially during a sea day with the wind coming across the ocean. Thankfully, we had our balcony if we really wanted an escape. Number 3, one thing we noticed was a lack of onboard activities. Sure, they had some, but nothing like we're used to. There might be one trivia event the entire day instead of multiple ones. 1 or 2 events going on at a time instead of 4 or 5. That means it's much less likely that something you're interested in is actually going on and available. How much of that is due to there being so many languages spoken by guests, I don't know. It's possible, but it seemed that most everything was presented in English unless otherwise stated. I think the only event we ever went to was a port talk, and if you look at a comparison between the events available on the Euribia versus the Carnival Jubilee, which is pretty comparable in size as a ship, you can see what I'm talking about here. The Jubilee has multiple events going on at any one time. Sometimes it's hard to choose, but that wasn't the case on the Euribia. We only had 2 sea days though, and we had a balcony to hang out on and read our books, so it wasn't a big deal. Usually though, I would spend more time going to things like trivia contests and other events throughout the day than I did on this cruise. The one trivia event they had was at ABBA, and it was like, I think during our dinner time, so I couldn't go. Number 4, in the modern era of e-musters, having to go back to an in-person muster drill is a bummer and a waste of time, in my opinion. The one thing cruisers need to know is where their muster station is. Having guests check in at the muster station and watch a short video or presentation should be enough. MSC's process is to have everyone go back to their cabin, watch a video, then call a number to verify they were actually in their cabins, all at the same time. At that point, everyone has to wait in their cabin until the muster drill alert comes over the speakers. And we had to go to our muster station using the stairs. You're not allowed to use the elevators. So for us, that meant using stairs only meant for crew. Once at our muster station, we had to check in with a crew member before we could leave. This would have been easier if the crew member we saw actually had been stopping people to scan their cards, or if there was a sign or anything. Instead, people were passing right by this crew member and having to go back after they ended up walking all the way through the muster station, which for us was, I believe, the casino. And they just walked out of it. Next thing you know, you're in the next muster station, and you're like, where was I supposed to check in? Not the best system. Number 5, when going over our onboard account, we discovered an extra charge that we were not expecting. There was a hotel service fee for 80 some euros each. However, we had prepaid our gratuities. So after speaking to guest services, we found out that the fee is something charged automatically because Europeans are not charged a gratuity like North Americans are. They reverse the charges, but I wonder how often people don't check and realize that they're basically being double charged for the same service. Well, not double actually, since it was less than what we were charged for our gratuities. There was also a €1 charge for the MSC Foundation. Now, while we didn't have that removed, it was just €1. It seemed a little underhanded to automatically take money for charity. That's what the MSC Foundation is. It's a charity. When you think that there were over 5,000 guests on board, that really adds up. And who's going to go down and ask for €1 to be removed for their charges, especially when it's just going to charity in the first place? Number 6, this was our first time using assisted debarkation, as we usually drive to and from the embarkation port and take our luggage off ourselves so we can get on the road quickly for our long drive home. However, with me not being able to lift luggage due to a recent surgery, we needed assisted debarkation. Now, I'm not sure how it works on every cruise line, but on the ones we've been on, luggage tags are put out at a specific time and location for people to go and pick up. The lower numbers reflect earlier debarkation times, so if you need to disembark early, you can do so. You basically can choose your time as long as you get there early enough and the tags aren't gone. On MSC, our luggage tags were delivered to our cabins the night before disembarkation. We actually had to go down to guest services and ask about this, as we didn't see any information about what to do except for a notice that you needed to notify them if you did not want assisted debarkation. Completely the opposite of what we're used to. Now, there was no choice on when we could leave the ship. Everybody on our deck got the exact same time, I think, and our group was among the last to disembark. So if you're disembarking a MSC cruise ship and you need to get somewhere within a couple hours of disembarkation, you should probably do self-assist. Number 7, If you're not aware, some European lines, including MSC, may have multiple embarkation ports depending on the itinerary. Now that means that not everyone will embark at the same time in the same port on the same day. For our itinerary, you could either embark at Kiel or Copenhagen. After experiencing this, I've decided I'm not a fan of cruising with multiple embarkations. There were multiple complications that seem to come with this method of cruising. From what I was told, the majority of cruisers embarked along with us in Kiel, but there were enough embarking in Copenhagen to cause a few issues. So one of them was the buffet. Now, while not a huge deal, and maybe this wasn't related, the morning we stopped at Copenhagen, the buffet line was out of control and there was a huge wait to get in. Now, while I found that there were certain times when it was best to avoid the buffet due to the lines, I wonder if part of the problem that morning were those trying to get some breakfast prior to disembarkation, because it was a late disembarkation. All I wanted was to go fill my bottle with ice and get some water or juice, but it wasn't worth waiting in line for. The next thing was getting back on board after our day in Copenhagen. It was way more difficult than it should have been. When we first got to the terminal, the staff were pushing everyone into the same line, which meant that we were waiting to get back on board with those checking in for embarkation. Even though multiple people tried to tell workers that we didn't need to go through check-in, we were ignored. Finally, one worker stopped to actually listen and led us into a separate line that led straight to security. Now, all MSC needed to do was to designate two lines. One line for current guests and a line for those checking in for embarkation, with signage. But since they didn't have that, it was a confusing mess. Communication, especially at embarkation ports, seemed to be an issue with MSC. And the last thing was the muster drill. Now, I've already talked about how I was not a fan of how MSC does their muster drill, but having one going on while we didn't need to attend was pretty annoying. However, it's going to be something you have to deal with if you're on an itinerary with multiple embarkation ports, especially if they're doing a in-person muster. It isn't just that every announcement is in 6 languages, which takes forever, but that there's nothing you can do during the muster drill. You can't take a nap in your cabin because they pipe the announcements directly into the cabins. You can't hang out at the bar because they stop serving drinks, and a lot of the bars and lounges are muster stations. There's just nowhere to get away from it, and it lasts for well over an hour with constant announcements. So it was very annoying. And you've basically lost out on over an hour of your cruise because you just really can't do anything. Number 8, overall, I think there was a general lack of communication on our cruise. There were multiple instances where information wasn't passed on or wasn't easily accessible. For those who have sailed on MSC before, it probably wouldn't be that big of an issue. However, for those on their first cruise with the line, some extra communication would have helped. Some of that could have been done through the cruise line app. Other times, like getting on at ports, a few signs would have been nice. So that wraps up the things that we weren't a fan of. But will the good outweigh the bad? I will let you know what I think and if we plan on sailing on MSC again at the end of the video. But before we get to all the things we liked about MSC and the Euribia, if you enjoyed this video and maybe even learned something, consider subscribing with a notification bell on so you don't miss out on any future posts. So let's get to the things we liked about MSC and the Euribia. Now, this isn't an all-encompassing list, but there are things that we like that maybe other cruise lines don't do or we just thought was done exceptionally well. Number 1, I really liked the elevators on the Euribia. I'd heard about some lines using this new elevator system where you choose the deck that you want to go to and then you're told which elevator to get into. But we had yet to experience this. I'm still surprised that the Carnival Jubilee didn't have them. I think the system worked really well. I rarely came across elevators that were busy. It happened, but not often. And it was also rare that you would see an elevator too full to get on when it did arrive. I definitely think these are the way to go as it prevents people from jumping the line and taking an elevator when someone else has been waiting longer. Number 2, while we had to drag our luggage all the way through the line to check in for embarkation, we were allowed to go directly to our cabin to drop off any bags and grab our ship card. Of course, guests weren't supposed to hang out in their rooms, but being able to drop off our carry-ons was something we weren't used to being able to do, as previously on other lines, only those with high loyalty status were able to do this. This is something I think all lines should go to, as dropping off bags shouldn't affect crew being able to turn over the rooms. Number 3, while many lines have been nixing the turndown service and going to only one visit by the cabin steward a day, MSC still has 2. While this has never been a big deal for us, it is still nice to know that you have fresh towels if needed, or there just aren't damp towels sitting around until the next day. So for those who really miss turndown service, maybe it's time to look into an MSC cruise. Number 4, I really liked the bar service on MSC. First off, you didn't need to go up to the bar, as almost everywhere had bar waiters that would come around and get your drink orders and bring you drinks. And unless it was really busy, they did a pretty good job of keeping up. In the evenings, we'd also be offered snacks. Some nights they served chips, others bugles, which I thought was a little odd, and there was often peanuts as well. I also appreciated that they didn't have those sugar straws that we're forced to use on Carnival. Those things are gross. There were a few times we were given paper straws, but at least they held up better than any paper straws I've ever used before, so kudos on that. Now, I preferred it when we were given the ones that were more like regular plastic straws, but are obviously biodegradable. I'm not sure why sometimes it was paper and sometimes it was the biodegradable plastic, but usually they were the plastic ones. Either way, I was glad we got straws and they weren't those gross sugar straws. Number 5, while I'm not a gambler, we still need to pass through the casino to get to the carousel lounge. Most cruise ship layouts mean that guests need to walk through the casino at some point. I'm pretty sure they do this to encourage people to gamble, but I really wish it wasn't the case, because it usually means that you are forced to walk through a smoke-filled room. No amount of air purifiers can mask it completely. However, on the Euribia, the entire casino was non-smoking. I was really surprised by that, as I had heard people complain that they found that the MSC ships have a lot of smokers, many of whom don't seem to pay a lot of attention to what's a non-smoking area. And I know smoking is more accepted amongst a lot of European countries than it is in the US. Of all the cruise lines out there, I wouldn't have thought MSC would have smoke-free casinos. Having said that, the casino was almost always empty. I don't think gambling while cruising is as big of a deal for Europeans as it is for Americans, because on American-based cruise lines, that casino is packed. Number 6, while I prefer having the option of anytime dining, which was not offered on MSC, it was nice to have the same waiters every night. I like that they eventually know your habits that way, like that we wanted still water instead of sparkling, and that I preferred a strongbow with my dinner instead of wine. I liked how we got all new cutlery with every serving, and for those who really miss those tablecloths that Carnival took away, MSC still has them. Number 7, I had heard that MSC ships were beautiful, and the Euribia did not disappoint. The ship seems much higher class than the cost of the cruise would suggest. Of course, there was the signature Swarovski crystal staircase that is so sparkly. There are lights in the steps that help make those crystals really sparkle and shine. You don't want to stare at the steps for too long, though. The layout of the ship made it easy to get around. There's no need to have to go to a specific deck to get across the ship, which is something older ships often require guests to do. Number 8, save this for last because it is a topic I've heard a lot of negative about when it comes to MSC, and that is customer service. I hear a lot of negative about that and the food, but as I said, I am going to do a separate video on what we ate and what we thought of the food, so stay tuned for that. But as for customer service, every crew member we came into contact with was super nice. I was honestly surprised after all the negative stories I had heard. I was expecting the crew to be more standoffish, I guess. Our experience was quite the opposite, though. We even had a favorite bar waiter at the Euribia bar and lounge named John. He would visit with us and made sure that we had drinks even when it was really busy. Maybe it has something to do with the ship that you are on, or even like the makeup of cruisers and how they interact with crew, or possibly MSC has really worked on retraining crew due to past reviews. Either way, we were pleasantly surprised and really enjoyed our interactions with the crew on the Euribia. So, did the good outweigh the bad for me? Will we ever go back on MSC? Yes and yes. While I wouldn't say that MSC is my favorite cruise line, I wouldn't have any issues going back if there was an itinerary I was especially interested in, especially since MSC cruises can be fairly cheap compared to a lot of the other lines. So have you ever been on an MSC ship? Which of these things I talked about would you agree or disagree with? And would you sail on one of their ships again? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like more information on our recent trip to Germany and our cruise around Norway and Denmark, why not stick around and check out this video where I give an overview of our recent trip and then come back for more information designed to help you have an amazing cruise. Have a blessed week, everyone.